to convince people that the problem of nuclear war had not gone away, that the end of the Cold War did not mean the end of the nuclear weapons era, and that the danger of nuclear war was still very much with us. I knew that this was true. When I was asked questions, which I often was, aren't you really worried about North Korea? And I responded, no, I'm really worried about the United States and Russia. That's where all the nuclear weapons are. I knew that there was a danger still, even after the end of the Cold War, as long as these weapons existed, that the US and Russia would get into it with each other and blow up the world. But I think, in honesty, I didn't really believe it. You know, I just couldn't really get my arms around the fact that nuclear war could happen. And I think that's the situation that all of us have been in for the last 30 years. We just didn't believe that nuclear war was still a danger we had to deal with. It was too horrible to think about. And as I think Michael has very clearly shown, that reality, that the danger does exist, has been brought home to us in a very terrifying way with the chain of events in Ukraine. And it is no longer possible for us to deny the danger that we face. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going to happen if these weapons are used. And I want to get directly to the question of a large-scale war between the United States and Russia, because we now understand this is a possibility. This could happen this week. Most of us have images in our minds of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the destruction that was caused there in 1945 by bombs that were about 15 to 20 kilotons, 15 to 20,000 tons of TNT. And those images are very powerful and useful warning to us about what nuclear weapons can do. But the most important thing that we need to understand is that Hiroshima and Nagasaki do not begin to prepare us for what a modern nuclear war would look like. Because if the United States and Russia get into a nuclear conflict, it's not going to be one relatively small 15 kiloton bomb on one or two cities. It's going to be many bombs on many cities, most of which will be 10 to 50 times larger than the bombs which destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We don't know the exact targeting strategy, bombing strategy of either the United States or Russia, but everything that is in the public domain suggests that major cities, a place like New York or Moscow, would be targeted with anywheres from 10 to 15 to 20 or more warheads, on each of which would be anywheres from 100 kilotons to 800 kilotons. And to imagine what that would look like, what a modern attack on a large city would look like, I use the model of a single 20 megaton explosion. A city like New York would probably end up getting something like 5 to 6 megatons, 5 to 6 million tons of TNT. Megatonnage is less than in the model I'm going to use. The destruction would actually be greater because you cause more damage if you divide the load into several different explosions spread out over the whole area you're trying to destroy. But it's kind of hard to talk about that. And so the model of a single explosion is easier for us to apprehend. Within 1,000th of a second of the detonation of that bomb, a fireball would form, reaching out for 4 miles in every direction. Within this area, temperatures would rise to 20 million degrees, hotter than the surface of the sun, and everything would be vaporized. The people, the buildings, the trees, the upper level of the earth itself would disappear. That's to 2 miles in every direction, 4 miles across. To a distance of 4 miles in every direction, the explosion would generate winds greater than 600 miles per hour. Mechanical forces of that magnitude destroy anything that human beings can build. To a distance of 6 miles in every direction, the heat would be so intense that automobiles would melt. And to a distance of 16 miles in every direction, the heat would still be so intense that everything flammable would burn. Paper, cloth, gasoline, wood, heating oil, plastic, it would all ignite. Hundreds of thousands of fires, which over the next half hour would coalesce into a firestorm, 32 miles across, covering over 800 square miles. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. all of the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. In the case of the New York metropolitan area, we're talking about something like 12 to 15 million people dead in a half an hour. And if there is a large-scale war between the United States and Russia, that level of destruction will be visited on every major city in both countries, and if NATO is involved, on most of the great cities in Canada and Europe as well. A study that we did back in 2002 showed that if only 300 of the 1,500 warheads that the Russian forces maintained in their strategic arsenal, if only 300 of these warheads got through to urban industrial targets in the United States, 75 to 100 million people would die in the first afternoon. All told, perhaps across the US, Russia, and Europe, 200, 300 million people dead. In addition, the entire economic infrastructure on which the rest of the population depends would be destroyed as well. There would be no internet, no electric grid, no food distribution system, no system for distributing fuel oil or gasoline, no public health system. And in the months following that initial attack, most of the people who survived the initial bombing would also die from starvation, from exposure, from epidemic disease, from radiation sickness. These are only the direct effects. We have to consider also the even more calamitous climate effects that would result from a nuclear war. The best estimate we have is that a war between the United States and Russia would loft 150 million tons of soot into the upper atmosphere, blocking out the sun, dropping temperatures in a matter of days by an average of 18 degrees Fahrenheit across the entire planet. In the interior regions of North America and Eurasia, the temperatures would drop 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. This is much colder than the coldest moment of the last ice age. And under these conditions, all of the ecosystems which have evolved since the end of that ice age would collapse. Food production across the planet would essentially stop. The vast majority of the human race would starve to death, and it is possible that we would become extinct as a species. This is not the plot of a grade B movie. This is the danger which we have been living with every day that we've allowed nuclear weapons to exist, and a danger which has been greatly intensified by the events in Ukraine, as Michael just described to us. It is a totally insane situation that we have allowed to exist. Why talk about this? Because this is not the future that needs to be. This is what is going to happen if we don't do something and change course, because this is where we are heading right now. But nuclear, because this is not